All right, so at this point, what we've been doing is when we've been writing web pages, we write content like, text or hyperlinks or images, and we present them to the audience, the people who are going to view this web page. The thing about that is it's a very one-sided conversation, and we're going to want to have sometimes the users give us, the people who develop or manage the website, some information. So, I make a website or a web page like this, it's got some text on it, it's got some hyperlinks, right? What if I wanted someone to comment? Users being able to put in their own information, whether they liked something or dislikes something, whether they want to put a comment on something. So the ability to do that means we need to let the users be able to add information or give us information. And the way that we typically do that with web development is something called a form. Okay, a form gets information from the user. Okay, so the way it works is that creating a form is a complicated concept, and it's something that goes beyond the scope of this class, to be perfectly honest. It's something that requires something known as front end and back end. When people talk about, this is something you're going to hear a lot about with web development and, this the idea of front end and back end. Front end is what the user sees, which is like, text and images and things like that. Eventually we'll stylize things. The back end is where this goes onto your server, which we've talked about, and a back end is programming that uses to enhance the website. Usually it's things like databases, or sometimes it could be sending information back and forth and things like that. So, this class, we're handling the front end of things. We'll handle what the form looks like and how to make a form using HTML. But to take that information and to store it actually requires something called a database, and that's a little bit more complicated. That's something that you would have to learn more about with, computer science courses and things like that. But the point of a form is that it can give us information. It could give us text information. It could be a choice from a list of responses. It could be something like a yes, no, or, a checkbox type kind of information. Do you want to subscribe? Yes, no, that kind of stuff. You could even submit files to people, or people can submit files to us, like an image or something like that. Like I said, the idea here is that if you want to store information from your users, you need something called a database. The way I like to think about a database is think of it kind of like a drawer, okay? So like a cabinet has drawers, and those drawers store information in it, right? So you could open them and close them. So it's like, that's kind of what a database is, but in a digital sense. So databases could, for instance, store prices of things online. It could store people's usernames and passwords, like when you log into like Canvas, you log into your email or something like that. You're checking your password versus a stored one that's in the system. It could store information about a user. So like when you log into Netflix or you log into your Amazon account, Amazon has information stored about you in a database, like your name and your credit card information, things like that. It can even store files like MP3s or Microsoft Word documents. So essentially that's what Google Drive is. It's a database that lets you upload your own files and store them. Or if you think about it, what is Instagram? Instagram really is a website where there's a database of images that you take. Every time you take an image and you post it to Instagram, you're taking a image with your phone, and then you're going to post it or upload it to Instagram's database for you, and then it gets added. Databases have to be programmed. This is a whole other thing. It's well beyond the scope of this class. Common languages are MySQL, WebXL. There's some newer ones, but these are kind of more classic ones. Okay. These databases are stored on a server. Remember, the server is where we store our files for our website. So I talked about the idea of a front end and a back end. The front end is what the users see The backend is where the server is, and that information will get sent to the server when it's completed. So we're going to make a form actually right now, a very simple one. It's not going to store information, but at least we can make one that visually shows up in a web page. I'm going to show you what we're going to be making, so you have an idea. So it's going to look like this. Okay. So it's a little sort of like, if you like went to a website and filled out an admission form, it would ask information from you, like your name or coming up with a password, or maybe you might choose from a list of presets or something like that. So this is what it's going to look like. I've actually given you all the information you need right here. So this actually already has all the information for you. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to type in Chabot College Admissions. And let's add in that image. So that's imcsrc banner.png. Notice it all goes in the body section here. It's nothing, this is all stuff we've talked about. Probably should go the other way, to be honest. That's better. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a form tag. Okay. What the form tag does is that this is where we should ask our questions. Okay. When a form is submitted to a database, only the information that's within the form will be submitted. Anything outside of this form tag will not work. Okay. So any information that has to get submitted to the database should be within this area. And I'm just going to start by adding some text. So let's just do p-tag, and I want to ask what the user's name is. What is your name? Okay. And we're going to ask a question, and what we want is something called input. Okay. Input is a tag. What input means is the user is going to input or give us some information. So by default, this isn't going to do anything. So we have to actually add an attribute, and the attribute is type. Okay, what type of input is the user going to give us? So there's actually different types of input. There's what's called a type, which means text. So anything that's text-based, like someone's first name or last name or their favorite color. We have what's called a password, which we'll talk about. We could have users submit a file. You could have a type meaning color, which allows them to choose a color, or a number, or a slider. And we'll talk about these. So I'm going to use type equals text. Okay. This is a one-sided or an empty tag, so the input doesn't require a closing tag. And I'm going to refresh. And what is your name? And I can click right there, and you can see that I can type something in. Okay. So I'm allowed to type this in. Next thing I want to ask the user is, what is your password? Now let's say I did this as a type equals text. Oops. The problem with that is I'm going to put in my very secret password of password 12345. The problem is everyone can see that, right? So I don't want people being able to see my password. I might be using this in a in a lab where people can look over my shoulder, or I don't know, you're at the Apple store or something. So I want to use something that's protects the identity of the password. So we're going to use type equals password. What it does is it allows for text, but what it will do is when you type something, password 12345, you'll notice that it doesn't show it. It kind of hides it, right? These tags, like any other tag, can have attributes. I'm going to use one called max length. Max length has to do with the number of characters that your password can have. Or the maximum number of, sorry, it's not specifically the password, it's the number of characters can go inside of the input field. So right now I can literally type in a never-ending string of numbers, but maybe I don't want to allow that. Maybe I only want to have like 5. So what I'm going to do is go back and say max length equals 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if I try to hit, oops, I don't think I refreshed it. Let's try it now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe I didn't save it. It's good to have, you know, no one's perfect. Yeah, I forgot to save it. Alright, let's try it again. See, even your teacher makes mistakes. It happens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so now I'm keep hitting and I can't, you know, add any more characters to this. Alright, so the thing about a text input is, you know, it allows users to put whatever they want, which is kind of great. I can put in Joe or Sally or, you know, Tim, or Zelda. The problem is also that when you let users put whatever they want, they can put whatever they want, even if it doesn't really answer the question. So, what's your name? That technically is legal. I can't prevent someone from typing that in. So that could cause trouble. What if I have a question like this? Like, the next question is going to be, you know, what department are you interested in? Right? And let's just hypothetically say I did this as an input text. The problem with that is they could put art, or they could put, you know, digital media. They could also just put like something that doesn't make any sense, like, I don't know, monkey or seahorse, you know. And so then like we'd have to contact them and be like, you wrote seahorse, that doesn't make any sense. Like, what did you really mean? And that's like the extra step. So rather than letting people type whatever they want, what if I gave them like a list and they have to choose something from the list? We can do that. That's called a select. So a select is like a list of things, and then each item in that list is what's called an option. So I'm going to make, I want it that people have to choose, for now it's going to be 4 or 5 things people can choose from. Art, chemistry, design, engineering, and law. So I'm going to go back, let's change this. I'm going to get rid of this, and let's type in select. Select is a two-sided tag, or so is a closing tag. And everything inside this, the options in my selection are going to be nested inside, so they're children. So there's an option. And I'm going to say art, biology, chemistry, design, digital media, that says digital media, and engineering. All right, let me save, and let's go back and refresh. All right, so you'll see that this has changed. So now, instead of this being something I can just type into like this, if I click, I can only choose from the list of options here. So I have to choose one of these options. So like, this would be useful when you want people to choose from a list of things, like maybe the size of a shirt, you know, it only comes in small, medium, and large, make sure someone puts in the right value, or maybe something only comes in a particular color or something like that. This would be a better way of doing that. Okay. Next thing. How many units are you going to take? Once again, this is one of those, like, you could do an input, type equals text. The problem with that is, once again, what if someone types something that doesn't make any sense, like blue? Okay. So instead of using, you can do something called a number. If you do that, that means whatever value someone puts in here has to be a number. It cannot be a non-number. So if I type this in, how many units do you plan, and see how I can, like, I can only type in numbers, or go like, this is going 1, 2, 3, 4. If I try to type something else in, like, you know, blue, it doesn't work. Let me type in E, but normally it's like, you have to put in a number. Okay. Next question. Let's say users can choose what color they want their ID to be. So, next question, what color would you like your ID to be? Once again, I could do a text, but, you know, what if someone types in something that's not a color? So there is actually an option called color. This lets me choose a color. So if you click, you'll get a little built-in color picker. People can choose whatever color they want. All right, next is something called a Boolean. A Boolean is a yes/no question. Okay, it's, you know, is it raining? Yes or no. You know, are you asleep? Yes or no. There's really, you know, you either are or you aren't. There's really no, like, in between. And so we can do that with something called a checkbox. A checkbox is basically like a yes/no question. Okay, so sometimes on a form, people will ask you questions where it's either yes or no. You know, do you want to subscribe to our newsletter? Yes or no. Do you want, you know, an ILC? Yes or no. So for this form, we're going to ask 3 Boolean questions. Okay. 1, is the student an international student? They either are or they aren't. 2, are they out of state? Once again, it's kind of a yes or no question. They either are out of state or they're not. And 3, do they want financial aid? Once again, it's a, you know, Boolean. They either want it or they don't. So let's go into here and, you know, let's do something like check the following that apply to you. So first we'll do international student, and we're going to do another input, and that type of input is going to be called a checkbox. I'm going to use a break to go to the next line. All right, so let's take a look at that. So this is a checkbox. Check or no check. Okay. Oops. All right. Out of state student. Once again, input type equals checkbox. And then finally, you know, am applying for financial aid. Input type equals checkbox. Okay, let's take a look at that. Okay, so each of these is independent of each other. So if I check one, it doesn't necessarily affect the other. So I'm going to go through here. Let's say I'm Joe student. My super secret password of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I want to be in the digital media department. I'm going to take 3 units this semester, and I'm going to set my color to my ID to red. I am not an international student, but I am out of state, and I'm applying for financial aid. Okay. Now, the thing about this is that, okay, I got this form, and I filled it out, but how does the browser know when I'm done? Because at any point, I can always go back and change this, right? So how does the browser know when to send the data to we talked about sending it to the server. How does it know when to do that? And the answer is we need a special button. Okay, this button is an indicator to the browser that, okay, we're done now. Please send all of the information in the form to the database. And the way that we do that is a special type of button, and it's called input. And the type is called submit. Okay, it's a submission button. What it does is when you hit it, it tells the browser to submit the data to wherever you've instructed, whatever the code you've written to tell the browser how to handle that data. Okay. So I'm going to go back. Let's try this again. My name is David Hurwich. Super secret password of 12345. I want to be in the digital media. I'm going to take 9 units. I want my favorite. I want my color to be blue. I am out of state and I'm applying for financial aid. There's a submit button. I'm going to hit submit. Okay. And then what it seems like happened is it just kind of refreshed, right? All my answers went away. So what happens is that, once you hit submit, the browser figures out what to do. Now in this case, the browser just kind of refreshes because it doesn't, we didn't really write any code to make it do anything. Okay, and like I said, to do that is actually really hard. It requires an understanding of databases and things that are beyond the scope of this course. I will show you a way that we can send the information somewhere. It's not a great way to do this, and I don't recommend it, but you could do this. So in the form, there's something called an action. Action is like what to do when someone submits the form. Now this is normally where you would run code. What we're going to do is we're actually going to email all the answers to ourselves. So I'm going to say mail to, and then whatever email you want. I'm just going to put my own email here. We also have to add another piece of data to make this work. I don't know if I have it here. I might have it in my instructions here. Yeah, method. We have to have what's called a method. A method, I don't want to get too deep into it. Basically, a method is telling the browser how to encrypt the data. Basically, we're going to use something called post, which means it's not going to encrypt the data at all. Which is why you shouldn't really use this method. But hey, So that's going to, basically what this says is don't encrypt the data in the form, send it to this email. The next thing we need to do is each input needs to have what's called a name. A name is like an ID for that question. So for instance, this is, I'm going to put in the word name. That's it's an attribute. And so because this is about the person's name, I'm going to call this username. Okay. I'm going to hit save. Let's go back. I'm not going to do all the questions, but I'll just type in David Hurwich, and I'm going to hit submit. And when I do that, notice how it opens up a mail program. Eventually. Maybe. Let's see. Does it do it? Alright, did it. See how it says username and then it says equals? So it's like this is whatever you type in here, that's going to be like the name, and this is going to be whatever the person types in is the value. So username equals David Hurwich. Okay. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say name equals user password. Okay, whatever they type in, that'll be the value of that. This is going to be, name department. This is name number of units. You can't really have spaces, that's why they put those plus signs there, but you can just, for now, I guess it's fine. I'm going to call this one name equals ID color. And then each of these has to have one too, each one individually because they're different questions. Name, international, name equals out of state, and name equals financial aid. All right, let's try that. Let's go back and fresh. What is my name? Joe Student. What is my password? 12345. I want to be in the chemistry department. I want to take 3 units. This is going to be my color. I am an international student. Let's hit submit. And you'll be able to see the results of it in a second, maybe. Let's see what happens. Let's try that again. Maybe I gave it too much data at once. Let's see if this goes better. So it's going to an email, and it's going to put all that information into an email for me. There we go. Now it's loading. All right. So username Joe Student, user password 12345, department chemistry, number of units 3, ID color. This is what's called a hexadecimal. We'll talk about actually that in a future next module when we start getting into cascading style sheets. And then international equals on, or basically true, so it means that I checked on the international. So you could do this. This is not a good way to send data because it's not encrypted. It's very easily hackable. So obviously you wouldn't want someone putting in information that was sensitive, like someone's, like email address or their credit card information. But this at least works and doesn't require you setting up a database. So try it out. Try making that form. I gave you a reference that you can kind of use as an example to kind of look at. Okay.